Hello, and welcome to Fall River State of Mind, a new podcast where we will have uplifting conversations on mental health for and with Greater Fall River's residents, mental health providers, and local leaders. Our goals are to explore local issues and current events concerning mental health in the Fall River area, to learn more about our local leaders, their work, and their perspectives on mental health, and to spotlight local mental health providers and programs doing good work in the Fall River area. My name is Owen Ivey. I'm a social worker, a mental health therapist, a certified grief counselor, an advocate, and a Fall River resident. Hello, welcome back. Thanks for joining me. This is episode 3 of Fall River State of Mind. My topic today is grief. In my effort to talk about difficult topics here on this program, to introduce you to local leaders and local voices as it relates to some of these topics. My guest today is Bob Mailloux. He is a father, a Fall River native, and he is also somebody who, in my early work doing grief support, I ran into as he runs his own grief group here in the city. Bob will tell you all about that. We'll tell you about how he got started, why he does it, what he likes about the work, what he thinks is important about the work. Bob is a really fascinating man, a really smart guy, and is a passionate grief worker. He deserves a lot of credit for taking what you'll learn is personal pain and turning it into a public good. As you'll learn in this episode, Bob runs a grief group that runs every other Thursday at 6 p.m. Just so viewers are aware, I also run a grief group here in Fall River that happens on the 4th Tuesday of every month at 5:30 p.m. At the end of my conversation with Bob, Bob will let you know how to get a hold of him and how to learn more about his group. One thing Bob and I definitely agree on is that no matter what you're going through in terms of grief, how long you've been going through it, or what you feel like you might need in terms of support, reaching out to someone like us, considering a support group, considering seeing a professional is almost always a good idea. A lot of people get a lot of good help from people like me, a therapist, a counselor, a grief therapist. But a whole bunch of other people get a lot of good help from everyday folks who are also grieving. And that's part of the magic that happens in these grief groups. The sad reality is that most of us in our daily life are ill-equipped, and we haven't really been taught how to talk about death, how to talk about loss, how to talk about grief. So, when it comes to the people around us suffering a loss, we're not really in a great position to help. So I hope today's conversation sheds a light on grief, on loss, on death and dying, and also spotlights Bob, my work, the work of other professionals here in the city, and I hope that everybody watching and listening remembers that there's a lot more grief support in this city than it might seem. There's a lot of people doing some really good work, and Bob's one of them. And if anybody listening has been putting off getting some of the support they feel like they might need in the form of a grief group or one-on-one counseling, I hope you'll reach out to us. So now, please enjoy my conversation with Bob Mailloux. Hi, Bob.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Nice to be out of the house right after that terrible snowstorm.
Amen.
You know, my first trip out of the house after the snowstorm was to the dentist, and I never thought I'd be happy to go to the dentist. But there I was, thrilled to get out of the house. So good to be here today. I'm glad we weren't delayed in doing this, and I'm very grateful you're here. I wanted to talk about grief. It's something I'm both personally and professionally invested in as a topic of conversation, as something that is worth talking about. I wanted to talk about grief as it relates to mental health, as it relates to human beings, especially here in Fall River. And I remember when I first wanted to get into grief work, doing a grief support group, I hopped on the Google machine and looked around to see who else was doing this kind of work because I didn't want to step on anybody's toes. And I came across you and your work, and it was really important for me to get to know you a little bit, get to know the work you're doing, and collaborate on this, as opposed to, competing in this space. So you've been absolutely tremendous in that sense. You've been really kind to me, and you've really helped me get the grief group off the ground. So thank you for that. But yeah, welcome in. I want people to know you and get to know you as a person. So why don't you, can you introduce yourself to us and tell us a little bit about how you came to do grief work, because you are not necessarily like professionally trained. You do this by choice.
Absolutely. Yeah, so my story is probably not unique out there in the world in terms of prior to getting involved with grief support, I always thought I knew what grief was because I had deaths happen in my family before, first one being my grandmother, and then losing my dad. I thought I understood grief, but in 2019, my wife, Kim, she was 32 and overall healthy, went in for a routine medical procedure, and due to complications ended up passing away suddenly, unexpectedly. And along with that shock, my daughter was 4 at the time. So we had never had these types of discussions about what life would look like when one of us wasn't there. So, immediately all my thoughts went to my daughter. I didn't want to mess up and make mistakes, which is funny because in grieving, you learn you're going to make lots of mistakes, and it's about getting back up. Not about not falling down. It's about knowing how to get back up. So,
and you don't have to have the right answer for everything.
Right. And I thought, okay, I can't mess up. I have to have all those right answers. So within a week, I had us into our first, and this is in 2019, before COVID really kind of shut things down.
Oh, right. Yeah, good point.
So it was October. And within about a week, maybe 10 days, I had us in our first family counseling session where my daughter and I would go in. My daughter would speak if she wanted to talk for 5 minutes or 15 minutes, it'd be fine. Once she was done, she'd go into another room and a little playroom, and then I would speak. Wow. And then I still wanted answers, so found a support group. And it was one that catered to the surviving spouse or guardian and the child. And that was out in Warwick. So I was working at that time in Rhode Island, driving home on a Monday night, picking up my daughter, turning around, going back to Warwick to do this meeting. And even at that point said, I need more. And found another group up in Easton, Mass. And I was just commuting all over. As much support as I could get. And it just kind of dove in head first. And and I was really trying to be there for my daughter. But through the process of attending these support groups, started connecting with other people and realizing two things. One, I wasn't alone. I thought this was a solo thing. Nobody else was going through what I was going through. And the other, that my daughter wasn't the only child going through this too. There were other kids like her. So it was encouraging for both of us.
Wow. So yeah, I think you told me off camera, like your background's in retail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Retail management was over 20 years in retail, and most of that being in management.
Yeah. So this is a complete, departure from that, but going to these grief groups for your own grief. What made you think, oh, maybe I could bring this to Fall River?
So going to multiple groups, I mentioned two, but there were other things I went to. I saw answers in so many places, not just grief support, in religion, in spirituality, New Age, you name it. I probably looked it up or watched a documentary on it. If there was a question, I looked for the answer. But the question I think that gets asked the most, that I asked, and I think most people grieve and ask, is why? Immediately, why? Why did this happen? Why her? Why us? Why? And I sought that answer in so many places. And in doing so, found there was places where added some positives into helping me answer that question, but there was a lot of places that kind of set me back, or I feel like steered me in a direction I shouldn't be going down, where I wasn't happy with what I was getting. So in the support group realm, there were groups that I thought were encouraging. But then there was groups where I would go in, let's say it was a Tuesday night, I'd walk in carrying my coffee, feeling like, okay, kind of ready to share, feeling like I was doing okay that day. But by the time I left that meeting, I came out like miserable, sad, worse than when I walked in. And when you come out of any type of therapy, I don't feel it's the goal to feel worse than when you got there. And sometimes it happens. Sometimes you hit something maybe you weren't expecting to hit on. But for it to be a regular thing where every week I was walking out feeling negative, I said, this isn't right. So
No.
When I set out to start the group, I wanted to take all the positives, all the things that I saw being done well in different groups, incorporate those and kind of push the things that were repelling me from grief support and kind of take those out of the group. And trying to find a way to kind of just get that recipe going into my group. So
Wow. Well, two things, strike me about that, if I may say so. I mean, the first thing is so you said, how soon after losing your wife did you go to therapy?
Oh, we were in there within 10 days.
Wow.
First one.
Wow. And your first group, do you remember how long it took you to get there?
Yes, it was. So she passed in October. We were in the first one in November, up in Warwick.
Well, I mean, I'll be curious what you see. I mean, as far as I see in my grief work, that's pretty rare, Bob. I mean, part of the conversation I have to have with people, I think, especially a lot of the people that come to me for the one-on-one work, is people will come to me usually between 6 months and a year after the loss, and they walk in thinking, they've made some error, they've made some misjudgment there. But I have to tell people that's completely normal, and statistically, it's very normal for people to, make use of resources, whether it is one-on-one counseling or even spiritual counseling or a grief group, in that 6 months to 12 months range. And I think part of that is because, and I assume, you were in this position as well, as the folks left behind, we have a lot of work to do in those first couple days, in those first couple weeks, really in those first couple months. There's kind of like practical stuff that has to be done, the settling of estates, closing of bank accounts, giving up a cell phone. But then there's, all the work that comes with bereavement, right? Mourning, setting up a wake, a funeral, an obituary, flying in people from out of town, putting them up with housing, getting them to and from the services, coordinating a burial, right? There's a lot that needs to be done. And in those early weeks and maybe even months, I'd like to think somebody going through an intense loss is getting a lot of phone calls, a lot of text messages, a lot of visitors, flowers coming at the doorstep, cards coming in the mail, and then I would hope, people dropping off food. Like there's a lot of support in those early months to where it takes a while for people to realize like, hey, this is intense, and I'm not prepared for this because none of us are, right? And it's at that point that they say, oh, you know what, let me call a therapist, or let me, speak to my priest or my preacher, or let me look into a support group. So, I don't know what that means to you, if anything, but it seems to me like that was pretty early on in the process. And I'd be curious how you knew then that you needed something more than you already had, to navigate that journey.
Well, yeah, there's a few things that come to mind. First one being, I guess, before I even say anything, is I definitely have to acknowledge that, we're all different. We're all wired different. We have different experiences. And one of the things that I know helped me was going back to my career, right? Retail management. It's always about planning, preparing, looking ahead. People joke about how you go into a store, a department store in July, and they've already got Christmas up. You're always planning out ahead. So I remember you talk about the support, and I remember, those first couple of weeks, everyone's taking time off of work and everyone's over. And I remember being in my kitchen and maybe 12, 13, maybe friends, family that were there, and somebody had picked up a bunch of Chinese food, and we're all there, and I had some friends from out of state. They were staying over, and we're all in the kitchen and eating. And somebody made the remark about, you're not alone. It takes a village. We're all going to help you with your daughter. And I was, that they talk about the stages of grief, and anger being one of them. Anger was visiting that night along with my friends, and I looked at them all and I said, yeah, it takes a village, but this full village, y'all going to go back to your lives at some point. I'm like, you're going to go back to work. You're going to have to go back home. You're going to have to do this. And I'm going to be here alone. So you can all say it takes a village. So the anger was awakening me to that. So, but my background in management was trying to take control of the situation. So something I learned for myself, we all have different things that really contribute to our grief and our healing. For me, the realization of the lack of control that I truly had, that I thought I had in life. Like if I live a good life, if I treat people well.
Do A, B, and C, and X, Y, and Z will happen.
And when the reality hit me that, I'm not in control like I was inside those four walls of a big box retail store, wow, that was my, come to Jesus moment where I had to accept that. I had to accept that. No, I'm not in this idea of control that I thought I had. I don't have. So it was being able to kind of compartmentalize that and look at it in that mindset. That was a big thing. The other thing that I know in talking to people who've grieved that helped me was my daughter. If I didn't have a 4-year-old that needed me to still be her dad that night, next morning, would I have wanted to get out of bed that day? Would I have wanted to get dressed? Would I have wanted to do all the things that I did? I said how one of the big questions everyone asks is why. One of the things I think everyone says when you're grieving is, I can't. I can't do this. I can't do that. I can never go back to that place. I can never smile again. I can.
You're so right.
So those two things.
We speak about things with a permanence that isn't really there. Like a lot of that is temporary, but we speak about it with permanence.
And especially with the I can't becomes true when we say it. Again, not to go off topic here, but I think back to those initial weeks, especially the initial weeks. I mean, this went on for months and longer, but I think specifically those initial weeks, a lot of the I can'ts. I came home with one of my friends. It might have been the week of the funeral, and outside behind where we live, there's a giant movie screen I had built. It's about a 16-foot wide movie screen out behind where we live. And I built the year, and my wife passed in 2019. In 2019, I put up the screen outside. Ironically, didn't know how important that screen would be afterwards when COVID happened and everything got shut down and we needed something to do, right?
Wow.
So I had a projector, and me, my wife, my daughter.
You were the place to be all of a sudden.
Yeah. And me, my daughter, and my wife, we'd watch these movies out there and have a great time. I came home and I looked at that screen one day, and I was with my friend who helped me build it, because it was a 2-person job, and I looked at it with him. It was maybe the week after the funeral, and I says, well, you can go get the chainsaw. We're cutting that down because I'm never going to use that again, and let's just fast forward, right? Yeah. Not only did we use it again, but last spring, we had a big windstorm. I come outside, a tree had fallen and sliced that screen in half, right? 8-foot tall, 16-foot wide wooden screen that was sliced in half. And what do you think I spent the next month doing on my own? Rebuilding
that back up.
What I said I would never do again 6.5 years earlier. So
wow, perfect example, and so grateful for that. Yeah, no, I definitely noticed that. But yeah, and thank you for talking about your personal experience. I'm really grateful for that. I think it's important for people to know. I tell people this all the time. My first client that came to me specifically for grief, came to me 20 years after the loss. It was the loss of a child, which is particularly difficult for people. But 20 years later, and I've met people like it sounds like you were at some point in your life, Bob, somebody who it happened 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago. It really runs the whole gambit, I think it's important for people to know that no matter where you are in your grief journey, it's always a good time to talk to somebody, seek out a professional, seek out, a faith-based person or seek out a group. So it sounds like you're kind of alluding to it without realizing it, but part of what I was hoping you might speak to more from that personal side of things is, do you notice ways in which your grief is different today than it was a year ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago? Can you speak to that?
Yes. For me personally, it was, we all heal in different ways. For me personally, it was getting to a point of what was my foundation going to be? So the night my wife passed, 2 hours prior to her passing, I grew up Catholic. 2 hours prior to her passing, I said a prayer, prayed to Jesus, please heal her, help her out. 2 hours later, she's gone. And at the hospital, they asked me if I'd like to speak to the chaplain. And I won't say the words I said because you'd have to censor them. But basically, I wanted nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And my response was, there's no God that would do this, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure. Totally normal.
At that point, started looking for answers, right? And when I tell you the roller coaster, so for people grieving and they don't understand why I feel like this one day, but the next day I feel different. But then 2 days later, I feel back to where I was 2 days ago. People will say, I feel like I take 2 steps forward and 3 steps backward. So I used to feel like that in grieving. Today,
Sure.
I don't feel this is my personal belief, is I don't believe that there's ever a step backwards. I think that everything is a step forward, that even those bad days that sometimes I'll still have, it's been 6.5 years, I have the bad days, but they're not as frequent and as often as they used to be. But when I do have one, so say tomorrow is one of those days where I'm at the supermarket and I see an item on the shelf and that triggers a memory, and I, stop, getting teary-eyed in the aisle, and I go home and I get into that place where I start having all the thoughts that want to take me down. I don't see that as a step backward anymore.
Good.
And what I've told people when I say that, and they kind of look at me funny, I tell them, think about the game Monopoly, right? The board game Monopoly. I go, so everyone starts with the same amount of money. And as you progress, say you're playing with 3 other people. You're going to have some people who go bankrupt. You can have some people who, do okay, but there's only going to be one winner. But all throughout that game, different things are going to happen. You're going to go to jail. You're going to buy properties, all these things. But at no point, even though you all start the same amount, 3 people are going to end up with nothing. Nobody ever goes backwards in Monopoly. Even when you go to jail, it says go forward to jail, pass go.
That's a good point.
You never go backwards, right? Every step is a step forward to the end of that game. Now when I have those moments, I don't look at them as steps backward. It's a step forward in my healing. That I needed that moment, even somebody who's 2 weeks into grieving, right? You need that to heal. The mistakes I made in grieving, which we could do a whole show just on the mistakes and the things I wish I didn't do. I know now, even though if somebody were to come to me today, new in grief, and they say, hey, I'm thinking of doing this. What do you think? And I would say, no, I wouldn't do that. However, for me personally, having made that mistake helped me get on the right track.
Sure, yeah.
So being able to identify those things now is something I couldn't do back then. Being able to look at things in a different light. But again, it's different for everyone. To your point, you bring it back to some point. Some people 20 years later, they come to the realization, hey, I need to do something. Some people, for me, it was, 10 days later, right?
Yeah.
But there are some people who never do it. And then there's, again, people who don't want to do it, who want to punish themselves, keep themselves, whether it's guilt, whether it's anger or lack of faith, whatever it is, who don't want to heal. That's a whole thing in itself.
Yeah. And that's, the root of that is a whole bunch of stuff. A lot of pain usually that person's in. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that personal experience, because that is part of what I try to enlighten people to when I meet with them, either in group or one-on-one. Is as far as I can tell, as far as we can tell in the field of grief work, is the journey through grief is one where the first thought of that person you lost or in some cases, it's not a person, it's something else. But the first thought is never going to be anything other than pain of the loss, missing that person. It's going to be that gut feeling of like, oof, that hurts. But what we see in the grieving process is the person's ability to go from that feeling of pain, that first thought of pain, to a place of love, connection, memory, nostalgia, presence here in the moment. That's what we build through the grieving process. In the early days, early weeks, maybe even early months of a loss, that pain is all consuming. It's everywhere. It's 99% of your day, where, I think what I've learned in my own grief, talking to people, with time and with healing, sounds like this is part of what you've seen happen in your life. You have those moments of pain, but maybe now, instead of taking days or weeks to move yourself into a different place, it takes hours or minutes or sometimes even seconds, right? And that's what I want for people. So
as you're saying that, I'm thinking about this because you're right, how it's all over the place. You can be in one place in the morning, then at lunch you're in a different spot. With grief support, a big thing, and when I say grief support, I'm not just talking about a group or a therapist, your support, your family, your friends. That's grief support as well. You need people to meet you where you are. A lot of times your support wants you to meet them where they are. So when they say things like, we just want the old you back, we just want to see you smile again, we just want this. We're empathetic by nature, humans. We're empathetic by nature.
Yeah.
People want to fix you. They think you're broken, and they think they want to fix you. I made a video one time I put on YouTube. I came home frustrated. Someone close to me made that remark to me. And I don't remember if this was 2, 3, 4 months later when people started with the comments. Oh, you'll meet someone again. You'll do like all the things you don't want to hear at that point.
Yeah.
And I came home. And I made the video. It's on YouTube. I went and got a mug from inside my house. And I said, some of you, and again, I was very cynical. The anger was a little there.
That's okay.
And I said, some of you haven't figured it out yet, and words aren't doing it. So let me give you a visual aid. And I went inside, I got a mug, and you can't see me in the video. You just see I put this mug down. I go, this is me. And I went and got a hammer. On the side of the hammer, I think I wrote grief. I go, and this is grief. And I smashed the mug on video. And I took the mug and I says, now, y'all see me broken and y'all want to put me back together again. So I had all these pieces of tape, and on it I said friends, family, faith, all these different things. And I started taping the mug back together again. And I said, there, the mug's back together, and you think I'm all back together. But here are my hopes and dreams. And I took a picture of water and I poured it in, and you saw it all leaking out. And I says, maybe that will get through to some of you, because they wanted me to meet them where they are.
Wow.
Now, you need them to meet you where you are, but you're all over the place. So it's hard for people to do that. That's one of the benefits of opening up and seeking that healing, because when you seek it through grief support, right, there's multiple people there. Chances are, if you're there with 10 other people, one of those 10 might be where you are at that moment.
Right.
Versus hoping that your spouse or your parent or your friend or your sibling is going to be there. They might not be where you are when you need them to be there. So
totally true. Yeah, especially with family members who are also grieving themselves. Like, it's so hard to kind of, meet in the same place. Totally. But that's a brilliant analogy and a brilliant visual. I'm sure people got it, at that point. So that's all we have time for today. That's part 1 of my conversation with Bob. Bob and I had such a great conversation, and I think he had so many wise things to say that I actually split this up into 2 episodes. We'll hear the rest of my conversation with Bob next time. So please, in the meantime, feel free to share your thoughts with us here online. Please consider sharing this episode with family and friends or on social media. Word of mouth continues to be our best form of marketing. And definitely make sure you tune in next time so you can hear the rest of my conversation with Bob, especially the part where he tells you how to get a hold of him or how to get more information on his group. For now, this has been Fall River State of Mind. We'll see you next time.